Let's talk COVID-19 booster shots. If you've been paying attention recently, you've likely seen that the FDA and CDC have now authorized a third dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. I'm going to go through who's actually included in this authorization, just as importantly, who's not, and how we got to where we're at. I'm going to start with the how we got to where we're at. So both the FDA and CDC have been reviewing information submitted by Pfizer in their ongoing studies of their COVID-19 vaccine to determine whether a third dose is both needed as well as effective and safe. Now, part of the trouble that they've been dealing with in trying to determine whether a third dose is needed goes back to the original intent of the vaccine. The original intent of the vaccine was to simply prevent severe disease and death. And the vaccines are doing an extremely good job at this. All of the vaccines are doing very well at this. What they also were shown to do was actually prevent you from getting COVID in the first place fairly well. That is, until Delta showed up and kind of ruined a little bit of that. We also have the fact that that portion of the vaccine effectiveness has waned a little bit over time. And that's where some of the discussion has come in as to whether or not we should give individuals an additional dose to try to build up that part of our defenses, or whether or not we should just continue down the path of preventing severe disease and death, which even after several months, the vaccines still do very well, and even against the current variants that are out there. So that's where a lot of the discussion has come in, and why there's been so much debate back and forth of whether or not we should really be giving booster doses or not. Some of the other controversy has been whether rich nations such as the United States, United Kingdom, etc., should really be worried about giving third doses when a good portion of the world has not even gotten their primary vaccine. Now, some of that I think is a bit of political grandstanding, because honestly, it's not like we're just going to box up and ship vaccines over to Africa. It just doesn't work that way. So I don't know that that's really necessarily a legitimate part of the discussion, but it's at least worthy including in the thought process. What did the CDC and FDA ultimately decide? And first, before I start into that, I want to clarify that I'm only talking to individuals who got the Pfizer dose as their primary series, because the data that was reviewed only pertained to the Pfizer vaccine. It didn't include information on Moderna or Johnson & Johnson. That should be coming in the near future. The other thing that I want to point out is there have not been any studies done in the United States at mixing and matching vaccines, so we don't yet know if it's safe and effective to mix Pfizer and Moderna or Johnson & Johnson in one of the two mRNA vaccines. That has been looked at a little bit in the United Kingdom with the vaccines that they're using, but it really hasn't been studied in the United States yet, so more to come on that, but not currently recommended to mix the vaccine manufacturers just yet. Okay, so let's talk about what the FDA and CDC did ultimately approve. Now, for individuals who are 65 years and older, if you had your primary series more than 6 months ago, you are now eligible for a third dose. This is regardless of whether or not you had any high-risk conditions. The next group is individuals ages 50 to 64. If you have certain high-risk conditions, and it's the same high-risk conditions we've been using all along to determine whether somebody's at risk for severe disease and death, that's individuals who have diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, if you're pregnant, if you're obese, etc. And I'll put a link to that list from the CDC down in the comment section below if you want to review that entire list. But if you're an individual that has one of those high-risk conditions and you fall between the ages of 50 and 64, you're now eligible for a third dose as well. If you're not in that high-risk category, it's not recommended that you get the third dose just yet. The next group of individuals that they discussed was individuals who are between the ages of 18 and 49 who also have those high-risk conditions that I just mentioned. It's recommended that you actually weigh the risk and benefits yourself and determine whether or not you feel like a third dose is necessary. Now, that's going to be a little bit harder because there isn't a clear-cut recommendation, but if you have one of those high-risk conditions and you're concerned about catching COVID-19 or developing severe disease, then you are authorized now to get a third dose. So not quite as clear as we would have hoped, but at least gives you the option to get the third dose. The last group is even a little bit more controversial because originally the ACIP committee did not include this group, but the CDC director did, while the FDA included this group all along, and that's individuals who aren't high risk for environmental exposure, such as healthcare workers, first responders, police officers, teachers. Where this list gets a little bit muddy is who all is included in this list, to be honest with you, because just like when we were prioritizing the vaccines back at the beginning of this year, that list got pretty muddied pretty quick, and it was individualized by state, and there was just a lot of confusion. So I'm hoping we'll get a little bit more guidance on who really is included in this high risk for exposure group, so that we can clarify that. It is very likely to include individuals who work in healthcare, first responders, police officers. Where it starts to get a little confusing is, does that also include teachers and grocery workers and et cetera? So that list could get really long really fast. So hopefully we'll get some additional information from the CDC on that. So stay tuned for updated information on that. All right. So just to summarize, if you got the Pfizer primary series, not Johnson & Johnson, not Moderna, but if you got the Pfizer primary series and you're more than 6 months from that series, and you qualify as anybody over the age of 65, or essentially between the ages of 18 and 64 with a high-risk condition, you may now get a third dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Hopefully we'll get some updated information soon from both the FDA and CDC on Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. I know they are actively reviewing the Moderna data. I'm not quite sure where they're at with the Johnson & Johnson data. It's been lagging behind this entire time, so I imagine it's going to be quite a while before we hear about boosters on Johnson & Johnson, but we should hear about boosters on Moderna in the next couple of weeks. The good news is another CDC study that was published recently showed that Moderna is performing just slightly better in both the ability to prevent primary infection as well as the ability to prevent severe disease and death than both the Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That may have to do with the fact that the Moderna vaccine is a higher dose, and the time between the first two vaccines was actually just a little bit longer at 4 weeks versus 3 weeks for Pfizer. So put all that together, and it kind of makes sense that the Moderna vaccine may be performing just a little bit better, but we'll see what the data surrounding the third dose of Moderna shows here, hopefully very shortly. So I hope that helps to clear up some of the confusion over who is eligible for a third dose, who should go out and get it now versus who should wait just a little bit longer. All right, that's all I have for you today. As always, if you have any questions, please leave those down in the comments for me. Hit that like button, it helps other people see the video. And as always, stay safe out there.